You think you're being realistic when you tell yourself, "I'm just not good at this," or "I don't want to get my hopes up." You believe you're being humble when you downplay your achievements or prepare for the worst-case scenario. You assume you're being responsible when you second-guess every decision and analyze every possible way things could go wrong. But here's what's actually happening. These thoughts that feel so reasonable, so protective, so sensible, are systematically destroying your confidence from the inside out. The most dangerous thoughts aren't the obviously cruel ones your inner critic screams at you. They're the quiet, seemingly innocent ones that slip past your defenses because they sound so rational. They're the thoughts that masquerade as wisdom, but are actually fear wearing a disguise. Your confidence isn't being destroyed by dramatic moments of self-hatred. It's being eroded by 1,000 tiny thoughts that you don't even recognize as attacks. Alfred Adler discovered something crucial about human psychology. We don't just react to reality, we react to our interpretation of reality. And those interpretations are shaped by what he called our private logic, the unconscious beliefs. We developed early in life to make sense of our world and protect ourselves from pain. When you were young, you developed a set of beliefs about yourself, others, and life that served a very specific purpose, keeping you safe. If you experienced criticism, rejection, or failure, your young mind created rules to prevent those painful experiences from happening again. Maybe you learned that if you don't try too hard, you can't be disappointed. Maybe you discovered that if you expect the worst, you'll never be caught off guard. Maybe you figured out that if you criticize yourself first, others can't hurt you with their criticism. These beliefs formed what Adler called your guiding fiction. The story you tell yourself about how the world works and how you need to operate within it to survive. But here's the problem. What protected you as a child is now limiting you as an adult. That inner voice that feels like it's looking out for you, it's not actually trying to help you succeed. It's trying to help you avoid the pain your younger self experienced. And there's a massive difference between those two goals. Let's examine some of these seemingly harmless thoughts that are actually undermining your confidence. I'm just being realistic. This sounds so reasonable, doesn't it? But when you dig deeper, being realistic often means automatically assuming the worst possible outcome. It means focusing on everything that could go wrong while ignoring everything that could go right. It means treating your fears as facts and your doubts as wisdom. In Adler's terms, this is a form of compensation. Your psyche is trying to protect you from disappointment by making sure you never expect anything good. But the cost is enormous. You're living in a world where positive outcomes feel impossible, where hope feels naive, where your own potential feels like a fantasy. I don't want to seem arrogant. This thought seems so humble, so considerate of others. But what you're really saying is, I don't want to risk being seen as too much. It's too confident, too successful, because that might lead to rejection or criticism. This is your private logic in action. Somewhere along the way, you learned that confidence was dangerous. Maybe you were told to stay humble. When you felt proud of an achievement, maybe you witnessed someone being torn down for their success. Maybe you learned that being small and self-deprecating was the only way to be loved. So now you automatically diminish yourself, not out of genuine humility, but out of fear of being too visible, too successful, too confident to be accepted. I'm just preparing for the worst. This feels so practical, so responsible. But what you're actually doing is training your brain to expect failure. You're rehearsing disappointment. You're practicing being defeated before you've even started. Adler understood that we move toward our goals, but we also move toward our expectations. When you spend your mental energy preparing for failure, you're not just protecting yourself from disappointment. You're making failure more likely. You're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy disguised as preparation. I just want to make sure I don't mess up. This sounds like conscientiousness, like attention to detail, like caring about quality. But beneath this thought is usually a deep fear of making mistakes, of being judged, of proving that you're not good enough. This is perfectionism wearing the mask of high standards. And perfectionism, according to Adler, is often a compensation for feelings of inferiority. You're trying to be so perfect that no one can criticize you, so flawless that you can't be rejected. But the cost is paralysis, procrastination, and a constant state of anxiety about not being good enough. These thoughts don't exist in isolation. They're part of what Adler called your lifestyle, the consistent pattern of thoughts. feelings and behaviors that you developed to navigate life based on your early experiences. Your lifestyle became one of self-protection through self-limitation. You learned to manage your expectations, minimize your visibility, and prepare for disappointment as a way of avoiding the pain of failure, rejection, or criticism. But here's the thing about lifestyle patterns. They're unconscious. You don't wake up and decide to sabotage your confidence. These thoughts feel like they're just happening to you, like they're objective observations about reality rather than the product of an old defense system. You might notice that these thoughts tend to show up at specific times, when you're about to take a risk, when you're considering a new opportunity, when you're feeling excited about something, when you're starting to believe in yourself. That's not a coincidence. That's your protective system kicking in to keep you safe from the dangers your younger self experienced. At the heart of these innocent-seeming thoughts is what Adler called the inferiority complex. Not because you were actually inferior, but because you learned to feel that way early in life. It's maybe through comparison, criticism, failure, or simply being a small person in a big world that felt overwhelming and unpredictable. The inferiority complex doesn't always look like obvious self-hatred. Sometimes it looks like excessive caution. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like self-deprecation or being realistic. Sometimes it looks like preparation or humility. But underneath all these disguises is the same core belief. I'm not enough, and if I'm not careful, everyone will find out. Your psyche tried to solve this problem through compensation, developing thoughts and behaviors that would protect you from experiencing that sense of inferiority again. But compensation always overcorrects. It's like trying to avoid getting burned by staying away from all sources of warmth. You learn to avoid confidence because confidence felt dangerous. You learn to expect less because hoping felt risky. You learn to criticize yourself because it felt safer than being criticized by others. But now you're living in a world where confidence feels foreign, where success feels impossible, where your own potential feels like a threat to your safety. Here's what I want you to understand. Those thoughts that feel so reasonable, so protective, so wise, are not actually looking out for your best interests. They're looking out for your younger self's interests, the part of you that needed to stay small, to stay safe. But you're not that child anymore. The dangers that shaped your private logic may no longer exist. The people who couldn't handle your confidence, your success, your full potential, may no longer be in your life. The world that taught you to dim your light may have changed. These thoughts aren't insights, they're artifacts. They're remnants of an old operating system that served you once, but is now holding you back. When you tell yourself you're just being realistic, you're not being objective. You're being selective with your attention, focusing on potential problems while ignoring potential possibilities. When you tell yourself you don't want to seem arrogant, you're not being humble. You're being afraid of your own power. When you prepare for the worst, you're not being responsible. You're being loyal to old fears that may no longer serve you. Real confidence isn't arrogance. It's not thinking you're better than others or that you can't fail. Real confidence is trusting that you can handle whatever comes, that you're worthy of good things, that you don't have to minimize yourself to be acceptable to others. Real realism isn't pessimism. It's acknowledging that life includes both challenges and opportunities, that you have both strengths and areas for growth, that outcomes are uncertain, but your ability to respond is real. Real preparation isn't catastrophizing. It's building skills, gathering resources, and creating plans while still believing in positive possibilities. Real humility isn't self-diminishment. It's recognizing that you're human, neither superior nor inferior, but valuable and worthy of respect, including your own. Start noticing these thoughts when they show up, not to judge them or push them away, but to recognize them for what they are. Old protection strategies that are now getting in your way. When you catch yourself saying, "I'm just being realistic," ask yourself, am I being realistic or am I being pessimistic? Am I considering all possibilities or just the negative ones? When you notice yourself downplaying your abilities or achievements, ask yourself, am I being humble or am I being afraid of my own success? When you find yourself preparing for failure, ask yourself, am I being responsible or am I rehearsing defeat? You don't have to declare war on these thoughts. You don't have to become someone you're not. You just have to start questioning whether the voice in your head that sounds so reasonable is actually on your side. What if confidence isn't dangerous? What if believing in yourself isn't arrogant? What if hoping for good things isn't naive? What if your potential isn't a threat to your safety? What if the very thoughts that feel like they're protecting you are actually the ones holding you back? Your confidence doesn't need to be built from scratch. It needs to be uncovered from underneath all the protective thoughts that have been covering it up. Those thoughts served you once. They kept you safe when you needed to be safe. But now they're keeping you small when you need to grow. The goal isn't to become reckless or delusional. The goal is to distinguish between genuine wisdom and disguised fear, between true caution and old trauma, between real humility and learned self-diminishment. The voice in your head that sounds the most reasonable is often the one that's lying to you the most. Your confidence isn't missing. It's just buried under thoughts that convinced you it was dangerous to find.